ton of these mini graffiti mops out there, and it's probably because so many graffiti writers love how compact they are, how carryable they are, how versatile they are in terms of that 5mm nib size, and probably how comfortable they are to write with to a certain degree as well. And today we are taking a look at 3 of the big guns here, guys, because there's actually a ton of differences between them, and I want to highlight and compare those differences today in a full tagging test and a drip test to help you guys know, if you're looking to try some of these out, which ones might be best for you as a graffiti writer depending on what kind of graffiti tagging you do. So let's get right into it. So what I'm going to do throughout this comparison is specifically try and highlight the differences between these mops by showing you in a tagging test, of course. And at the end, I'll actually sit down with you and tell you what I believe to be, in my experience using these mops, the most important features of each individual one. So to start off, I'm just going to tell you what you need to know about them right off the bat, and then I'll leave the talking to the mops and let them showcase their strengths for themselves in our tagging test. And to start off, I don't like to put too much emphasis on pricing, because if you're doing it right, you buy a mop and you use it for years and years. For example, I bought this mop at least 4 years ago. I actually have a video on YouTube of me unboxing this Grog mini squeezer, and all these years later, I'm still able to use it, replace the nib a couple times. That's about it. But the price is still important based on what you're actually getting, so I'll lay it all out for you right now. To start off, the Grog Squeezer Mini 5 FMP, which is the 5mm nib version, comes filled with 30 milliliters of their Grog full metal paint. That's the FMP, and they sell roughly for around $7 US each. We're gonna use US dollars just because it's the universal-ish currency. I would use Canadian, but then no one would understand the value of anything. Similarly, as you can tell just by the shape, the Molotow Dripstick Mini here holds 30 milliliters of their alcohol-based permanent paint by Molotow, and I can't wait to tell you guys how many tags you can get out of these in my experience, because I think it'll surprise a lot of people. And thirdly, out of the bunch here is the super tiny Soultip 007 10 milliliter here, which comes filled with, you guessed it, 10 milliliters of the Soultip paint, and it'll cost you around $5.49 US. Obviously, you can fill each and every one of these with just about any paint or ink that wants to flow through a mop nib, but you'll at least get to see how each of the formulae react in our tagging test when used in each of their respective mops this way. Speaking of which, we're gonna fill up these mops right now, make sure they're nice and full, and do a drip test just to highlight the differences specifically in the paint formulae before we get to laying down some tags. Let's get to it. Okay, so we're gonna start off by just doing what I'm gonna call a line and dot test, or a drip test, and we're literally just gonna put a line and dot of each of these mops formulae next to each other so we can just see the difference in thickness of the paint and just how they react sort of on a nice smooth surface. That'll obviously be very quick, but after that, when we start our tagging test, start tagging up the names of the subscribers and the kings supporting over on the Patreon, I will tell you exactly, in my experience using these, how many tags you could get out of each of these mops. I've used the Grog Squeezer Mini for a long time. I've also used the Soultip 007 for quite a while, and I've got a pretty good idea about the Molotow Dripstick Mini here as well. But during our tagging test, that is when I'm going to be telling you how squeezable each of these mops feels, how durable they are in my experience. But the main thing we're gonna do by throwing these tags up is just highlight the differences between the mops themselves so you can see it as clearly as possible. So let's get a couple lines up here. So just starting each of these formulae off with the lines here, you can tell the Grog full metal paint itself is just a little bit thicker than the other formulae there, specifically much more so than the Molotow Dripstick paint formula formula. Similarly, the Soultip paint is actually fairly thick as well. It just doesn't quite compete in the thickness category of the Grog full metal paint exactly. But we're going to get a lot more familiar with each of these formulae as we throw some tags up, so let's get to that. And as we move on to our surface tagging test here, I want to give a big shout out to today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is a massive online learning hub with thousands and thousands of classes for you to learn from and check out, especially if you're a creative or curious person. Now, I've had a free trial of Skillshare for a little while now, so take that how you will. But being that calligraphy is so important to a graffiti artist's knowledge, and I only learned a bit about it a long time ago, I decided to search up calligraphy on Skillshare. And my goodness, do they have you covered. I've looked at a few calligraphy classes on there, but the paper finger calligraphy and hand lettering class by Bryn Chernoff is a very good practical look at calligraphy for those of you who are looking to maybe get a quick, fast, straight to the point look at what calligraphy can do for you. And you can get your free trial of Skillshare by being one of the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description or in the pinned comment as well, which will give you a full month free trial of the entire Skillshare platform. And just a quick note from the editor here, I'm not good at calligraphy, but like I just took that one class and I'm making this at least. So you know, like as someone who doesn't know anything about calligraphy, being able to do that is pretty good for me. So seriously, if you want to get better at tags, calligraphy is a great asset to have. If you do sign up for the Skillshare free trial, definitely check out one of those calligraphy classes. But without further ado, let's get into this tagging test. We're gonna start off with one of my personal favorites. I'm gonna keep my bias out of this, but I have used this one the longest. The Grog Squeezer Mini 05 FMP filled with the full metal paint. I topped it up with Jellyfish Fuchsia, but it did have a purple in there before, which was also full metal paint. So let's see what it looks like. Perfect. So starting off with the Grog Squeezer Mini here, I have always found this to be a very squeezable and controllable mop, although it does loosen up over time. Of course, you do have to remember that. So when you do get these, they're a little bit stiffer than some of the other ones right out of the pack. But I have always filled this with the Grog full metal paint just because I personally like that nice thick paint. And because I have found its weatherproofness incredibly good in terms of being in the freight environment or other outdoor environments. I'll even link you to the video where we took a look at exactly how weatherproof the Grog full metal paint is, as well as a bunch more. That's in the top right hand corner and in the description for you to check out. The one thing with the 5mm nib size here, and I think it's just because the smaller the nib, the higher up it sits with respect to where the valve pushes it up, is just they wear out super fast, and that happens across all brands. You guys know how much I love Grog, but I can honestly say that the Grog nibs wear out the very fastest. That being said, and because I've seen these be used on an entire line of freight cars, I know it sounds ludicrous, but if you really want, you can get up to about 90 tags out of one of these little things. That's if you're using them like you're seeing me use them here. Very few drips in some of these tags. You can do that consistently with this mop. You don't have to get those drips each time. I should mention that I think when I filled this just now, I didn't really mix the pigment in as much as I should have before pouring more into this Grog Squeezer. So it's a little bit more transparent when you're just doing a nice thin line. So I think for this time that is sort of my fault. But like I said, I swear you can get between 50 and 90 tags if you really wanted to with this mop. And the same goes for the Molotow Dripstick Mini here, of course. Perfect. It's 30 milliliters instead of the 35 milliliters that the Grog Squeezer Mini offers in the 5mm size specifically, but the paint formula itself is just that much thinner. It's much harder to write without getting a ton of drips. I will say that the Molotow Dripstick Minis here come right out of the box. Very squeezable, very comfortable to write with. That is one thing I found with the Molotow Dripstick in particular. It feels nicer right away than the other mops. Once you break each of these mops in, you know, you'll mold it a little bit to the shape of your hand and they all work about the same. But right away, you can tell they use just a grade of plastic that's 1 or 2 levels above what Grog is using. And the biggest thing I want to emphasize about the Molotow Dripstick specifically is let's not underestimate the refill from the back system, specifically when we're talking about 5mm nibs. Trying to refill anything through the little opening that a 5mm nib offers is not fun. You gotta make a funnel, or you have to have something that pours really small. It's so much easier having that refill from the back system, specifically for these mini mops. Another plus of this that I probably have not mentioned enough is that it makes it super convenient if you're trying to mix colors. I'll be honest, I haven't used the Molotow Dripstick Mini consistently enough to know how its nib holds up over time. So if someone wants to leave a comment and just let everyone know their experiences with the Molotow nibs in particular, I'm sure everyone who appreciates it will give it a big thumbs up. I'll give it a heart as well. From the bit that I have used it, the nibs have been just as good as the other 5mm nibs, if not a bit better. But speaking about the refill from the back system, I have heard 3 or 4 people complain, I think, about it leaking from the back. To be honest, I've used the Molotow Dripstick 860DS, I've used the Molotow Dripstick Mini for a little bit now, I've used the Rollerball Dripstick Minis. That has never happened to me. My theory is, if you're one of those people that holds a mop a little bit like this, squeezing it closer to the back, I think you might be warping the plastic just enough to break the seal at the back. That's my theory. At least I'm just trying to solve the problem that some people are having here, because it's obviously not consistent across the markers. I haven't had the problem, but I have heard a couple people say they have. The mop itself, like I said, very, very comfortable, very squeezable. You feel like you have a ton of control. I would say a little less so than the Grog Squeezer Mini personally, but that could just be because you're using a bit more of a runny paint in the Molotow. But moving on to the Soultip 007 here, the 10mm size, I have used this mop for ages. And even though it's just 10mm, because of the squeezability of it in combination with the shape of the mop, you can seriously get about 30 or 40 tags out of this. Trust me, I have tested it out. I think we even tested it out in the review of the 007 Soultip on the channel here. I find the 007 perfectly comfortable to use. The squeezability of it makes sure that you have very, very good control over it. Some people do say they find it a little bit short. If you have particularly large hands, you might not be able to rest the back part of it on your knuckle. If that is a problem for you, you can just use the OTR 006. It's a little bit longer, exact same nib size, and that might solve that problem for you. The Soultip paint, I would say it's more vibrant than the other 2 paints specifically. It's a little bit thinner than the Grog full metal paint, but not nearly as thin as the Molotow alcohol-based permanent paint is. That being said, since we're talking of these paints, I do have to say the color selection for all 3 of these mini mops is great. They all have tons and tons of colors, which in itself isn't really the important thing, but the important thing is that they all have massive numbers of refills as well in all of those same colors. Out of the 3 mops, I have to say though, the Soultip 007 is the only one that is small enough that you can carry it in your pocket and just not really know it's there. The other 2 are certainly pocket sized, but carryability goes to this Soultip 007. But hopefully seeing how each of these 3 mini mops writes is giving you guys a good idea of how they perform and hearing what my experiences have been with them. But I want to specifically provide an argument as to why it's good to use each of these individual mops specifically, and probably the argument that resonates with you personally means that I'm emphasizing features about the individual mop that are more important to you, and maybe that's the one you should pick up and try. I don't know. But I'm going to specifically list out the pros and cons of each of these right now, so let's get to that. Okay, the pros and cons of each of these 3 mini mops, which one might be the best for you. Starting off with the Grog Squeezer Mini 05 FMP. It's a great all-around squeeze mop for a very reasonable price, and it comes with a nice thick paint formula. That paint formula though, since we're speaking of it, does have some opacity issues I find in the warm colors specifically. Yellows, Oranges, not that great, even the red. Whereas the cooler colors like the blues, the purples, the pinks, all of those colors are very, very nice. Like I said, this comes with one of the thickest paint formulae that you can get. The nib is a little bit harder to keep clean just with how the cap is designed. It'll stick to it, so you do want to clean the threads often with something like acetone, aka the main component, nail polish remover. But the cap keeps the nib nice and wet and fresh, so if you don't use this for a week or two, it's not going to dry up on you. Next up, the Molotow Dripstick Mini here. It is super squeezable and comfortable right away. There's no real break-in period where you gotta loosen the plastic up. That's always nice. It has the unrivaled refill from the back system that Molotow provides for you. And you can sort of just tell the marker body quality is a step above Grog specifically. It is actually the only one that doesn't have a mixing ball in it, interestingly enough, or doesn't come with a mixing ball at least. And it is by far the most expensive of the mini squeeze mops here. And next up we have the OTR Soultip 007 here. It's the 10 milliliter. It's super squeezable. It's the easiest size and shape to carry around with you comfortably. It's the cheapest of these options. You can still get a ton of tags out of it, and it's great for the casual graffiti writer. But if I'm missing any points that you guys like or dislike about any of these three mops in particular, leave a comment, let everyone know your experiences with it. You guys can share more knowledge in the comments than I ever could in just one video. We've got many more comparisons just like this one on the channel. If you're looking for the best solid paint stick to use, you can check the video on screen right now and I'll lead you to that. Similarly, we've got one for the metalheads out there as well. I hope to see you over there very soon. Until then, peace.